If you think forest photography is hard, it gets even harder again when you've got this dusting of snow. It is so beautiful to look at, but man, it's very hard to compose and create a composition that flows well. The snow becomes quite distracting in some regard, if there's not too much of it especially. This is a type of frame here that I've failed to really capture in the past. So let's see what we can do today. It's one thing to be shooting the trees with the telephoto, but then getting the wide angle out and getting a lot going on, it's really hard to direct the eye. Let's see what we can do. I think less is going to be more. Finding a really good main subject, a big tree, one that's really green and standing out, and then try and use the white of the snow to frame it up. Got to have that definitive, strong focal point to lead the eye to, the main subject. Let's have a look up here. The ground here is so soft. Most of the injuries I've had or near misses have been in the forest like this. You can just suddenly fall through the ground. It's beautiful, but it has its it bites. It can bite you. I like this tree, but unfortunately there's not enough snow here because the huge canopies stop that snow from coming down. That's all we need though, one big guy, and then just a nice frame of ferns. Maybe up around this direction. I'm liking the look of that guy up there, all the moss. Ooh, let's see. Man, it's just beautiful. You can get frustrated in these moments, in photography in general, when something looks so great and you feel like you're not doing it justice. Don't let that frustration kick in, because once that happens, their creativity just dwindles from there. So just relax, it'll come to you. That's what we're doing here now, just relaxing, exploring, it'll come. Just having a look at this guy now, and definitely don't want to go too wide. When I'm going wide, I'm getting all those distractions everywhere. Zooming in almost 24 mil and just going for the lower portion of the tree with all the white around it. So I've actually moved in really close here, right in front of it, wide angle, and kind of doing a composition that I probably normally wouldn't do. And I think it's working here because it's really just simplifying things and making that tree stand out. So I'm on 14 mil, but because I'm so close to the subject, doesn't really matter. And that's allowing me to pick up all the ferns around us. I'm just sitting on f11, ISO 200, 25th of a second. I really like that. And we're just getting a little bit of depth by showing the trees off to the left up there. Look at the light on them. We've got to do something up there. Man, it's so fun. It is so fun. Wow. Have a look at the depth and layering here with this side light. 1, 2, 3, just leading the eye in. Not getting too much of this right hand side. Man, magic. All right, here's a nice frame. Look at this one. Curving branch coming in, curving in, solid greens in the middle, lots of moss, and the light hitting it. That's one of the key factors. And then a nice foreground. One of the challenges is this, keeping the lens dry, especially this 12 to 24. It's a nightmare to clean, honestly. It's probably the biggest downside of this lens. This is all the raws here, but first and foremost, the processing workflow. I'm going to open up this file, and you can see how contrasted the scene is. Huge dynamic range, backlit scene, dark environment, not ideal. I'll just give you a quick little look at how I'd approach a file like this. We won't do a complete start to finish, but I really want to show you how I approach these scenes, which is very common in landscape photography. If you've seen some of my other videos or the course that I've made recently, my retouching course, you know that there's 4 things primarily that I'm working on. It's the light, texture, color, and contrast, LTCC. And keeping that in mind will help you make sure that you're creating good depth and separation through the frame, because at the moment, there's not much depth and separation. We've got bright tones in the back, and then the majority is dark, and that's it. We look at our histogram, and that's exactly what it's telling us. Lots of darks, some brights, and that's it. We want to make sure that the eye will travel through the frame, and then there's clearly some separation and depth to do justice to what we've experienced. So getting onto the workflow, the first thing that I typically do these days is put the color profile to landscape. When we do that, colors get a bit more saturation on them. You'll even see the histogram change slightly. So that was the original. There's a landscape. Not the end of the world if you don't do that. Like I said, I'm only started doing that recently. It kind of just gives you a quick head start with the workflow. Now looking at the image, we really need to work on the light, the first part of our 4 things that we adjust. And what I mean by this now is I want to make sure that there's a progression of dark to light. We've got that already, but the problem is all the dark tones just don't have enough detail. Got to be careful though, because with our modern sensors, you can actually reveal too much detail. We've got the ability to bring everything right out. Of course, that's 1, not going to look realistic, and 2, it won't help the eye flow through the scene. So I'd start by bringing the exposure up a little bit, say 0.8, some of the shadows, not too much, and then I'll recover some of those highlights. Now, ultimately, everything up here it's a highlight. It was actually white cloud there. So when I recover that fully, there's no color anyway. So you just got to accept the fact that it's white. I think actually, to be honest, if it was blue, that would be really bad. They'll be very distracting, and the blue would clash with some of these other colors in there. So it just comes down to, well, how bright do we want it to be? I like to use the histogram as a reference for that. It's giving us a rough indication of, are we actually losing the details, or is it just bright tones and that's it? I'll just jump down to the vibrance here and just push that up a touch, and maybe the saturation. Okay, now the color tone here, I think going cooler is going to do justice to the fact that it was a cold day. We've got snow, so going over to the global temperature and dialing that to the left, you can see, look at the difference it's making. It's going really bringing us into that winter feel. I often find on these forest scenes as well, the tint I'll dial back a little bit into the left, just gives the green some more punch. It's going to be subjective though, right? So I don't know, say about there for now. Now it's time to work on our contrast and adjusting the contrast through the scene. At the moment, we've got high contrast everywhere. I primarily want the high contrast in the front and then less in the background. That is how nature works, and that is how we're really going to get separation through these different planes here, foreground, midground, and background. I use the adjustment brush, and typically I'd adjust the shadows, the blacks, and sometimes even rehaze. And what that would do is those dark tones far off, when I start to apply the brush, like on that tree, it's making those dark tones lighter, and that therefore is making them look further away and separating from things which are now closest to us, because I'm not going to brush anything too close. I'm leaving these edge trees and doing anything beyond those. So anything in the distance, running up here, just some of these guys in the back. And like I've said a few times before, this is how nature works. It's just the perspective that we get outside from the atmosphere. Alright, so we just do some of that. Like I said, not going to do the whole thing now. I don't want to waste your time too much with that, but you get the idea already just by running through like we have. I'll just turn that brush on and off. Alright, see the difference that's making. Now I want to show some of the guys in the front. So this time just shadows. That way they won't become as revealed as everything in the background. But I still want to be able to see those nice greens, and I'm going to run that down. So now instead of background, it's more midground that I'm working on. Hit the tree there, like so. Beautiful. Now for the foreground, I will actually bring up the texture. So this is now where we're giving the real strong sense of depth. Because it's closest, it should have more details essentially. So this is the texture part of my workflow. The front should have the details. The background, I'm going to leave as is. And even in the front, a little bit more contrast. And I might even cool that down a little bit more so the eye will flow from the cool foreground to a slightly warmer background. About there. For the whites and everything in that background, I'm going to bring the highlights down and the clarity, and it might even rehaze slightly. This is just going to help. The highlights is probably down a bit too much, but I'm just trying to make it not so noisy back there. That's by reducing the clarity primarily. I'll go back to those highlights though, make sure that that doesn't have to be as far down as what we had it. Now with one last brush, I'm just going to do some exposure on our main tree just to make sure that it's visible and standing out. Often I'll start with a brush like I am now in exposure, but then I just keep running that along. Because it's very light, the feather is 100 on these brushes, so it's a nice soft edge, which means the outer edge of the brush just gets a small percentage of your adjustment, and that way I can be quite liberal when I'm using it. I'm doing one more, this time with white. White is light, so anywhere that does have a bit of luminosity, it's like dodging. It's just going to lift it nicely, nice and subtle, not hitting the sky, that's bright enough. Just run that through, even a little bit through the front here. We'll crank that up a touch so you can see what that's doing. Let's just do a before and after now and see where we began and where the file is headed. So quite a big difference, okay? Like I said, the key though, I might even now jump in the grading. The key is retaining the natural tonal range in the sense that it was a dark environment. I don't want to reveal too many of those dark details, or not revealing them overboard anyway, because then the eye won't flow through the scene. I'm just cooling these midtones here. You can see what that's doing. It's really just emphasizing our winter feel. You could even maybe go a bit, no, stay away from the green and go more into the blue. Somewhere around there. Going back to the global adjustment, maybe a little brighter overall. Like so. Alright, there we go. So side by side. Now I'm not saying this is done. This is one challenge of having a YouTube channel. You know, you want to get videos out, but I like to take my time with the processing, and it's what I call letting it marinate. I'll come back to it later, have another look, keep fine tuning it. But this really gives you a good 90% idea. Just hitting some more of that moss on this beautiful tree. Like that. So this is the workflow. Now I'll just show you a couple of other images which I've singled out and shortlisted and will most likely keep from the shoot, but hopefully this gives you a good idea anyway, and don't be discouraged if out in the field the back of the camera is looking like that. As long as you got the data there and the histogram, you're going to reveal everything later on when you get back here on the computer. So here's the other three that I enjoy. We'll just quickly look at each one. I just love this big beautiful tree, and it actually worked in my favor here, not having the snow in the foreground there. That just gave us a slightly darker foreground, which really helps the eye just keep traveling through the scene, so we're not having too many distractions down the bottom. You can see if there was white down there, how different it would be. So the other part I like about this was just the big arm coming off the tree. So for that reason, the big branch there, I've offset the main tree slightly to the right of center. So that's the center line there approximately. Offset it to the right because the main weight of the tree is off to the left. So now that's helping balance things out. There's also I think a bird's nest if we have a look up here. Up there. I believe that is anyway. So that's a cool little bonus feature. Another one that I quite like is this one here. You remember this one out in the field. Bit of a balancing act again. The opposite this time. If you said the center line was, you know, approximately here, where's the main weight of the tree? It's off to the left. I did that because the tree's leaning to the right, so it's counterbalancing things. I really liked in the background how I had this big guy reaching towards the center, and then I love these details out here as well. So multiple layers in this one. There was that backlight coming through, and now we do have the snow in the foreground, but there's an even covering all the way around. I think this one, out of the ones I've selected, probably best sums up the experience of getting the snow in the forest. I just love all that moss draping down as well. That's why having the backlit scenes are really effective in bringing out the best in that moss. So yeah, I do like that one. And then another one, this one's a little bit more complex. You would have seen the video footage of this. So just trying to balance out either side with main subject matter pretty much dead center because it has a lot of symmetry to it, that tree. The downside about this one is the background has had a lot going on. There's a lot of snow back there hitting all those branches. So there's so much white. You can see that as I zoom in. That's a tree fuchsia there. But look at the branches on the fuchsia, just covered in snow, which, yeah, beautiful, but a little bit hard to, you know, thankfully this main subject has so much moss. So I feel like it still gets the image across the line. Not too much snow in the foreground. I think that actually helps on this one as well. And then a bit more snow in that background area. So there we go. 3 images. Again, the processing is probably 90% on these. And they all looked just the same as that first one that we ran through. So the beauty of the forest in the snow, absolutely magical. Just some food for thought there when it comes to composition and your processing. Thank you for watching the video. Please consider liking, leaving a comment, and if you have any questions, I'll always get back to you. Otherwise, hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.